Thank you, friends. You may be seated. On behalf of the family, I want to thank everybody for joining us here in the chapel, and for those who are watching on the live stream, thank you so much. Before we begin, just a gentle reminder, if we could take a moment to please, a little louder. If we could have the volume raised a little bit. Thank you so much. Just a gentle reminder before we begin, if we could please take a moment to turn our phones on silent, not to disturb the sacred funeral service. The service today will be officiated by family members, and I'm just the funeral director, but I do want to begin with one ancient act. It's called kriya. Kriya is the Hebrew word for tearing, also means to announce. And our sages have this idea that when we lose somebody very close to us, we all have to remind that the person's still inside us. Even though a person has many hats, many different clothing garments, the inside is really what lives on. And so we're going to ask Dean and Mark to please stand if you're able. We're going to say this blessing together, and we're going to make this tear on this little ribbon in just a moment. Repeat or say it with me. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam dayan ha'emet. And we say amen. We just said a blessing, which is blessing God, the ruler of the universe, the judge of truth. We know the Hebrew word for truth is aleph, mem, tes. That's the first letter, the middle letter, and the last letter. We don't always have the whole picture, but if it's not the entire thing, it's not the truth. And we know that your Father is in a place where he's able to hopefully have that full vision and all the missing puzzle pieces. And so we just sort of begin with a word of humility about our service that we're about to begin. And if I could ask you both now to just tear a little on the ribbon using your hands if you need some help, just up from the bottom.
Hello, I'm Mark Engel. Thank you all for coming today to celebrate the incredible life of my father, Howard Engel. I can see some of you are a little disappointed. We all know Howard wanted a Viking funeral. Unfortunately, the state of Illinois denied his request to have his grandson, Malcolm, shoot a flaming arrow into a boat on Lake Michigan. I won't go on too long about his life because everyone here has their own story to share about him. Stories that reflect the way he touched people, the way he touched people's lives in his own unique way. What I can say is he lived his life exactly the way he wanted to the very end. Dad, we love you. And knowing you, I am sure you are already planning your next adventure. Now, my brother Dean is going to come and do a eulogy.
Thank you all for joining us today. I have been thinking of words that describe my dad, your relation, coworker, friend. Words like bold, iconoclast, appetite, assertive, confident, rational, irascible, intense, humorous, and realist. He was very much a realist. He used to tell me, I didn't make this world, but I have to live in it. Words of wisdom. And how he chose to live. His passion for reading, his home library, for travel, culture, and entertainment, for Epicurean delights was immense, and he pursued these with joy. He was ultimately able to say, I did the things I wanted to do. What a wonderful thing that is, and certainly not everyone can say that. His world to live in was greatly enhanced when he came to Mesereau. He was person number 7 in the insurance benefits division, which he shepherded and grew to over 200 employees. He was given a chance and the resources to show what he could do, and he did well. I teased him after the third party in his honor, another farewell party, that maybe he didn't understand. Maybe he was failing to realize that he wasn't supposed to show up back to work after that. And he laughed that eternally boyish giggle of his. He knew that he was valued greatly there, and it made him feel very, very good. There's an old World War II movie where Van Johnson and others repeatedly joke sarcastically that they found a home in the Army. But my dad truly found his work home and family at Mesereau, no joke. We had some magical times with him as a kid, when we were kids, Mark and I. He wanted to do all the things that he never got to do as a child. Theaters, museums, ball games, nice restaurants. As many of you know, there was never a commemorative or informative placard that went unread as he passed it, as his interest in everything was so epic. We were encouraged to share in the fun. He never made us eat from the kids' menu, for example. Steak and shrimp and cheesecake for dessert, for us, no problem. He let us watch pay-per-view TV in our own hotel room in Toronto before anybody even had cable at home. We watched Blazing Saddles 3 times in a row. He took me to 3 Cubs games in a row just to try to see Lou Brock steal a base and break a record in sports. We were too late with Hank Aaron. We saw homer number 725 against Rick Russell. He worked hard, striving to prosper, principally to do the things he loved and wanted to do. We, children of his, continued his legacy, exposing our kids to culture, entertainment, history, and we know they will do the same. Never dictating how to live, but engaging with life and leading by example while they develop their own individual selves and strengths. That was his philosophy. He also loved to question things, to go for it. I don't mean he particularly liked risks or gambling or was irresponsible, as he was not, but he liked to think outside the box and roll the dice sometimes. I'll give you 3 examples. He once applied for the art director job at an advertising agency and got the job despite the fact that he could not draw a circle. He could not even draw a straight line. But what he could draw was an inference, a profound insight. After listening to them, he realized they had plenty of creative people. What they actually lacked was a capable administrator to make sure things got handled. Someone to allow the creatives to flourish in their work, and there he was naturally to save the day. Decades ago, he had the opportunity to pitch the old Riverview amusement park for their insurance. They informed him that an older established agency had already offered on-site medical treatment, trained nurses as part of their benefits. We have that too, he confidently shot back. We can match or beat what they offer. He was awarded the business despite never having heard of such a thing or having any knowledge of how to go about providing it. But he saw an opening, dove into it without hesitation, and made it true after the fact. We went to see some Bears games back in the day. There was always a huge line of cars waiting to get into the parking lot, and everyone patiently queued up and waited, sometimes for an hour, to enter. One day, he noticed that there seemed to be 2 lanes and a little hut on each side of what looked like 2 entrance lanes with a person in each one. We discussed and debated this, what could we do that? What could we do? He finally said, I don't care, I'm going up there. What could happen? And we drove up there, around 100 cars, and went right in. They waved us right in. And it was the craziest thing. Nobody else had thought to go there. Nobody realized there were 2 lines, other than my dad, the great iconoclast. So 100 cars scrambled immediately to follow us, and that was my dad. One more word does come to mind, if you'll pardon my French: bullshit. He hated it. He liked to call BS on things that just didn't pass the smell test to him. Not that he couldn't sling it himself. He slung some there to get that art director job. And he could back it up. And as Mark Twain said, it ain't bragging if it's so. He was a smooth talker, silver-tongued and persuasive. In my youth, especially, I was quite certain he was the smartest, savviest, and coolest character that ever lived. Well, eventually, we get older. We realize our parents, our relations, our friends, ourselves are merely human after all. Not angels, nor demons, not robots or servants, just fellow humans with all that entails. Everyone has their contradictions, their messiness, their inability to please all of the people all of the time. There are no exceptions. Love, we learn, is the magical glue that holds family together, in spite of our messy imperfections. We loved my dad, and we will miss him. We and he were especially thrilled he was able to meet Vivian, his great-granddaughter. He will remain a towering figure in our lives. And thank you to all of you who gave him love and comfort and friendship over the years. We did not enjoy watching him suffer with illness. It had to be his decision. We agreed on how to live and how to handle the end of his life. We did not want to do anything to hasten his demise, but also not demand that he prolong it for our sakes. In the end, he handled it like another trip, like he was booking an excursion to a destination unknown, shuffling off this mortal coil en route to the afterlife, if there is one. We know he'd have opted for the guided tour with the headphones and audio, the extra deluxe package with access to additional areas, and if there are crudité and hors d'oeuvres, more's the better. It is the one journey nobody has truly ever made and returned to report on, and we will miss him not reporting back to us. He was never the type, of course, to post a photo or Yelp review. Restless, an inveterate traveler, always planning the next trip with never enough time and too many things still left to explore. As Robert Frost wrote, "The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep and miles to go before I sleep." A few weeks ago, however, frustrated by a myriad of intolerable ailments, he decided to move on, to rest, to sleep. "The shades of night fall fast," Longfellow wrote. "Now in the twilight cold and gray, lifeless but beautiful he lay. And from the sky, serene and far, a voice fell like a falling star. Excelsior, Excelsior, Dad, ever upward, Excelsior." Yeah.
Let's hope I can get through this. I'm Veronica, and I'm Howard's daughter-in-law and a good friend. He was really a good friend. He would usually say when he introduced me to someone, "You know, I've known her for nearly 40 years. Can you believe that? We've been friends for 40 years. And then he goes into this commentary about what people are and how good they are and how bad they are. Dean said some things about him because Howard said, we are alike in many ways, he and I. And I think that's why we were friends, is because we saw some things very similarly. I always said to Mark, I think he married his father. You know, Dean said being confident, the realist, straightforward, and sometimes we were a little punchy. That's who we were. Yeah, a little. Olivia put together a great collage of photos, and just the memories flooding back from looking at all those pictures made me think about one I saw with one of my kids sitting on a pony in preschool. They asked grandparents to come in one day, and instead of Howard just coming in like the other grandparents, he had to do a production. We took the kids to Harm's Woods for pony rides, the entire class, okay? So it's go big or go home. So that's the kind of person he was for his kids. And continuing those memories, as Dean said, about exposing his kids to things. And we're carrying on those same things, exposing our kids to things. And him and Sid exposed our kids to a lot of things as well. I would say our friendship really started when Sydney became ill. And we had that opportunity to really talk to each other, because before that, everybody's hustle bustle, working, living your life and whatever. We just hadn't had that opportunity to really get to know each other. And through that situation, we did. And he talked to me about things I don't think he talked to his sons about, which is okay. He was concerned about meeting someone new and how his kids would feel about that. And so we talked through some of those things. And then he met Gail. When Sydney passed, he and I spent a lot of time together. We did a lot of lunches and talking. And it was so awesome to sit in the restaurant and we would giggle at how people watched us, trying to figure out what's the relationship between those two, right? And Howard didn't make it easy for them sometimes, right? And then, so it was funny, the things that we would do in that situation. And as Jean noted, he could be stubborn at sometimes too, But I did find that in order to deal with Howard, you had to give him the facts, and you had to give him the options, give him the information to let him make a decision and not tell him what he should do. And that's how I learned to deal with him. And his caregivers in the end also, they knew how to deal with him in that way. Give him the facts, let him decide. And sometimes he did change his perspective on things, right? He was not always the smartest man in the room. and he did learn some things from others. He wanted to communicate with Olivia, so he learned how to text on that flip phone, right? And when Gail came into his life, she's like, no, you got to get that iPhone and learn how to speak into the phone and send your texts and stop trying to do the finger thing. So you can teach an old dog new tricks when they want to learn them too, right? Okay. When Gail came into his life, we didn't spend as much time together, but that didn't end our relationship. He would call me and say, I know I shouldn't be telling you this because you're my daughter-in-law, and then he begins to tell me. And I would say, it's okay, because just think of me as your friend. So you're telling your friend about whatever naughty stuff you and Gail did. We will miss him. And if you think about that familiar poem about how you lived your dash, Howard really lived his dash. And as his son said, to the end, I was talking to him when he decided that he was going to do hospice. He said, Veronica, you're the only one who's going to listen to me. I'm sick of taking all this medication. I'm just tired. And I said, that's fine. So let's do it. And we went that evening. And he said it to Mark and Dean. We were all there. And you could just see just the tranquility just come over his face that it was time. He's just tired. He didn't want to do this anymore. And then he went on a bunch of excursions. So, hospice doesn't mean that you're bedridden, because he was not bedridden. Who was that? Arla took him on the Federal Reserve, and Adriana took him on the Federal Reserve, and he went to the Air and Water Show. He went to some of his favorite restaurants, and then that last week, he's like, I don't have any more energy. This is it. Let's just move on. And so we were ready for that. So he really lived his dash, and we are going to miss him. Okay.
Speaking of Adriana, why don't you come up and say a little something? She had a very special relationship with my father, and I'd like her to share her thoughts.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Adriana Duenas, and for many of you here, I've known Howard for 30-plus years. Howard was so much more than a mentor to me and many in this room. He was a true friend, a guide, and a father figure. His steady presence, generous heart, and belief in others shaped me in ways I could never fully put into words. He had a gift for making people feel seen and supported, irrelevant of their background or where they came from. I'll never forget our flight to St. Louis back in 1995. We grabbed rookie wings from the United pilot after a rocky flight, and I threw up on them and handed them to me with that trademark grin of his. That moment captured his spirit. Howard was always ready to lift people up and give them confidence to spread their wings. Howard wasn't only part of my life, he became part of my family's life. He was always there for every milestone, whether marriage, having my kids, college graduations, and we all hold him so dearly and always will. What made Howard so special was his respect for all people. He never judged anyone by their background or where they came from. That belief in fairness shaped every part of his life, even his decision to raise his family in Morton Grove, because he wanted his children to grow up surrounded by diversity and the richness it brings. Above all, Howard was deeply proud of his family. He spoke often of the joy that brought him and the pride he carried in their accomplishments. Mark and Dean know this. He loved you so very much, and he was so proud of you, of the both of you and the families you created. He loved his grandchildren, and then most recently, Vivian. I feel like I've seen every part of every life step that you guys have taken. Howard's legacy lives not just in his family, but in all of us who were fortunate to know him. He taught us about integrity, resilience, and compassion. Howard was deeply loved, and his impact will never be forgotten. I love you, Howard. Always have and always will. And for some of you, I actually had the pleasure of meeting him about 2.5 weeks ago in one of the excursions. I texted my dear friend Richard Price, and I said, I'm a little stressed. I don't know if I should have a martini and a cigarette. He's like, why not? Howard would love that. We met at Joe's Stone Crab, and we had the most beautiful lunch, and it was the closure we both needed. We passed around his old, office span, and he just said, this is where I started, and he loved that. But more importantly, Mark, indeed, he loved you both so much. So thank you.
Is there anybody else that might like to say something before we close today? I know, like I said, you all have all kinds of fond memories of him. If anybody would like to. I have one thank you that I'd like to say. As my father was getting sicker, we had the good fortune of having the finest caregivers. And the one anecdote that I'll share, because you all know that if you were stupid, you could not be a friend of my father's. So I see Sarah and I see Elizabeth back there, and I can tell you how grateful I am for these two, because they called him bullshit 50 times a day. Elizabeth shaved him on Tuesday. Sarah pampered him all day on Wednesday. He was so attached to them because of the care he was receiving. He was treated like that was their father. And again, I can't begin to tell you what a difference that made in the end. Gail will tell you, everybody who was involved, Kara, Dean, Florence, Olivia, Andrew, we were there all the time, and they were the glue to us. And I just want to thank you for him. We just loved you guys, and can't thank you enough. So in closing, thank you all for coming. We love this guy. He was so unusual, and I really can't say anymore. Thank you. Yehuda?
Is there anybody here that served in the military or the United Armed Forces of any? Okay. We have one. Do you mind stepping forward? I did not serve, but I do have the great privilege of sometimes presenting the flag to gentlemen such as Mr. Engel. And so what I'm going to ask this gentleman just over here, what's your name? Tim. In a moment, you're going to, if you don't mind, present the flag to the family, and I'll help you. But I have to say the following. On behalf of the President of the United States and a grateful nation, please accept this token of our nation's appreciation for your fathers, your loved ones, honorable service to our country and to our nation. Thank you, Tim. So, friends, this concludes our service here at the chapel. The interment will take place immediately at the family plot at Shalom Memorial in Arlington Heights. Upon return from the cemetery, the family will be sitting Shiva at the Royal Ridge Clubhouse. That information is available on the folder received on the way in. If you did not receive one, there was several copies available on the way out. For those who are watching online, that information is on the funeral home website. Memorial contributions to Mr. Engel's memory can be made to the National Kidney Foundation. That information is on the same places. For those who wish to join the family in procession to the cemetery, one will be forming just outside the funeral home parking lot. For measure of safety, please make sure you obtain an orange funeral safety sticker, which can be placed on the inside passenger side windshield of your vehicle. For an additional measure of safety, our staff will be placing magnetic flags on the top of your vehicles throughout the procession. While in procession, please make sure your bright lights and hazard lights are on at all times. Please drive as closely to the car in front of you as safety permits. Please use your horn liberally, especially while we go through intersections, as we want to avoid any cars from entering the procession, and we want to avoid any gaps. Please avoid talking on your cellular device while in procession to the cemetery. The following individuals have been honored to serve as pallbearers. When I call your names, if you could please rise and stand next to Mr. Engel's casket. Jeff Goodman, Malcolm Engel, Miles Engel, Sheldon Cohn, Dean Engel, and Mark Engel. At this time, if I could ask everyone here to please rise as we escort the casket, the pallbearers, and the family from the chapel.